All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to another conversation with the Academy of Creative Coaching. I am here today with actually one of our facilitators and members of Academy of Creative Coaching, although he's a part of other organizations and has his own company as well. We're going to hear a little bit about that. But I'm here with Dr. Joel Perez. And I think I've heard you pronounce your
It's,
last name
yeah,
differently.
Pérez.
Perez.
There you go,
Yes,
there you
Perez.
go. Mhm, mhm.
Yes. Okay,
Yep,
excellent.
good.
Well, thank you so much, Joel, for joining us today and just having a brief conversation on this conversation is going to accomplish two things. One, Dr. Joel just launched his book, so we're going to hear a lot about that and also launch a book on a topic that's super important. And I believe a lot of coaches, a lot of people who are leaders in DEI, culture, organizations, HR, professional development, all those things
Mhm.
can definitely benefit from this conversation. And I was just sharing before we went live with Joel that I'm recently became a director in the DEI world, and when I listened, his book is on the way to to me. But when I listened to some of your other interviews and some things that you're posting on LinkedIn, I am like, I am your target audience. Like they say, you know your target audience when you feel like the person has picked you out of a crowd and
Mhm,
talked directly to you. And
mhm.
that was exactly how I felt just from
Right.
the little bit that I've already gleaned from your book.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I literally can't wait to dive in. I got to remember other people are listening to us. Like this is not just you and
Right, right.
I. So the first thing I want to talk about is let's just talk about the title. Let's just
Okay,
dive into the
yeah,
title.
right, yeah.
How intentional? I'm sure it was intentional when you decided to call it the Dear White Leader. I guess it's you knew your audience, right?
Yeah, yeah, well, that's part of it. The other part of it was after the murder of George Floyd, I was pretty wrecked and had a lot of Black friends who were wrecked, and, I wrote a blog post called "Dear White Leader," because I wanted to call out my white leader friends at
Mm-hmm.
that particular moment in our history to take an active role in using their privilege and positionality to advocate for the change that we know needs to happen in our organizations, in our families, in our communities, in our faith organizations.
Right.
So that title had stuck with me, and then when I decided made a decision to write a book on the topic of cultural humility, that is where I wanted to continue. I wanted to use that title as the heading. The subheading changed a number of times, mainly because I was getting feedback. But you're right. I needed a target audience. Those of you who've written books and or coach people to write books, if you don't have a target audience, you can't write a book for everybody because no one's going to pick it up.
Exactly.
And so I was very intentional. It also led me to decide on how to publish as well, because I wanted to keep control of the, hold on to that title and use it without. I always feared like if I went with a traditional publisher, they may decide, yeah, no, we need to change the title.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to give up that control. But to your question, yes, the title was intentional. It was for the target audience. It's for white leaders that want to get better at leading diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging work, but don't know where to start or are feeling stuck. That's the
Mm.
primary audience. The secondary audience are leaders who want to get better at doing those same things. And the concepts in there are applicable to all of us, regardless of our
Yeah.
race, ethnicity, gender. Now, the examples I use in the book are my white clients and organizations that wanted to move from performative statements to action. So the examples are white people and organizations that are trying to do this work. But I also share my own story and my own journey in developing this posture. And with the feedback I've gotten is that people really appreciate that because I there's a level of vulnerability in the book about me and in my own journey and acknowledging that I still make mistakes.
Yeah.
even as a man of color, who's raising biracial children, one of which identifies as queer, that I still mess it up.
Mhm.
And it's about having this posture, because the challenge is not challenge, but diversity is not stagnant. It continues,
Mm.
and it's about having the right posture as opposed to having a checklist of things that you need to do in
Yes.
order to feel like you've accomplished something.
Right. So the right posture. I want to talk about that for a minute. So I love that you talked about you have your own biases, and I think I heard on another podcast, I do microaggressions.
Mhm.
And I think that is such an important place to start. I was recently in a boardroom of all these chiefs and talking
Mhm.
about diversity, and they were just so annoyed and angry with
Mm.
an organization that because they felt like there's all these microaggressions happening and what are we going to do about it? And I'm like, can we start from a place that I think for most people, not all,
Mhm.
are not intentional with their microaggressions and that
Correct.
we do them,
Mhm, mhm,
and if we can start from with that and
mhm.
not a different posture. But let's talk about posture, and then I heard you talk a lot about previously about self-awareness and how
Yes.
important that is as a leader and then
Mhm.
in doing this work.
Right. Yeah. So the self-awareness piece is key
Mhm.
in everything that we do as leaders, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, or just leadership in general.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't like to be self-aware.
Right. Right.
I make light of it, and when I do workshops on cultural humility, that I don't like the fact that I'm now 52 and my hearing's going out. I now have a hearing aid. I've lost most of my hair. Um, like when I say I'm going to get a haircut, my daughter looks at me and she's like, "You don't have any hair. What do you mean you're going to get a haircut?" And my head shaved. And that's been new to me. And I don't always like looking at myself in the mirror because I don't always like what I see. And I know I need to do better.
Right.
And it's the same thing with leadership. We mess up. And so developing the ability to become more self-aware, and I believe the way one of the key things in doing that is having a growth mindset. So when you
Mm.
become aware of what's wrong with you, or if you've made a mistake, how do you use that how do you use that mistake to get better
Yeah.
and not become isolated or angry and not make any attempt to get better. So that posture, and again, when I do these workshops and talks, I talk about having I show an image of a young man with his arms wide open, ready to receive, instead of arms folded, standoffish. And that's that posture that I want people to visualize, have in their minds as they think about having a posture of cultural humility, willingness to be open to feedback, willingness to learn from mistakes, willingness to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that posture is going to help you with that. But it's a posture that takes time to develop. It's not something that happens overnight. I stress in the book and when I talk with people, you cannot read the book and feel like I know what I'm doing. You have to do this work in community. You cannot
Mm.
in isolation. You need others around you to say, "Hey, Joel, what you just said was really offensive." Or, "Hey, did you think about it this way?" Or, "I have a question about what you just said," or "Help me understand what bias means," or privilege. And you're having a conversation with people, um, instead of feeling like you can sit in your bedroom, read a book, or go to
Yeah.
a conference, get a certificate. Those are important things and they should be done, but you need to really do this work in community if it's really going to take hold in your life, because you're learning
Mm.
from others and they're learning from you.
Wow, that's powerful. Um, And that also leads me to think about another powerful quote that I heard you say and related to all of this work was that busyness does not lead to organizational change.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes as DEI professionals, we get caught up in giving impact reports and showing the list of the busyness that
Mhm.
we've been doing and the checklist.
Mhm. Mhm.
And how do we get ourselves out of that? Because to some degree, it's a defense mechanism to
Yep.
prove our worth
Mhm.
and the salary that you're paying me.
Right.
So
Mhm.
how do we get out of that?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to do the work, right? But you got to be strategic. So it's not just about doing the work for the sake of doing the work. You have to have an impact. So in the book, I share a framework that an organization can use to guide the work and also provide a way to identify key performance indicators
Mm,
so you know you're making progress instead of just doing the work and feeling like, yeah, you've checked a bunch of boxes, but you actually don't know the work that you're doing is having an impact. So you
yeah.
have to track the work and demonstrate that you are doing the work that you say you're doing and changing the organization, or else it just becomes a checklist that you're just doing but not really showing that you are having an impact. So doing is important. Demonstrating you're doing is important, as far as like, this is the speaker we're bringing in, these are the books we're reading, these are our, how we're integrating in our hiring practices. But then the flip side of that is measuring the impact. So looking at data, using data guided or having data guided decision making is extremely important in this work. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing organizations need to realize is that I talk about, I just forgot the name of the what it is, but it's the adoption cycle of change. You have
Hmm.
folks who are early adopters in an organization who are like, Lee, this is great, we're doing it. And then you got the people in the back who are like, I hate this, I don't want to go. And those are the laggards, right? Those are the
Yeah.
people that are going to be kicking and screaming. The problem is for us, and I put myself in the same group, is sometimes we focus too much on the laggards because they're the ones who tend to be the loudest,
Yes.
complain a lot. We forget about the people in the middle, and those
Mm,
are the people that I believe, if change is going to be successful, you have to focus on the middle, because they are the majority of the people and they will move the change in a certain direction.
yeah.
The problem is we get so caught up in the laggards, or the people who are just up in arms, or even the folks who are already down the road. Those are important people. You need those people, but the focus really needs to be in the middle. And I build off, or I talk about John Cotter's work on leading change, and how you do that and get the right people in the room. But you got to track progress, you got to report progress, so that way you're making progress.
Yeah. I love that. Love that. Um, so many places my mind is going right now. So before I go to the other two characteristics of cultural humility,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
want to ask you about the three groups.
Okay.
So, how do you handle the laggards who hold the power in an industry or
Okay. All
organization,
right. Mhm.
um, feeling threatened or feeling like they're being overlooked and not valued,
Yeah.
and still balancing, the progress you're making and the initiatives that you're making for the middle and those
Mhm.
adopters.
Well, I talk about curiosity being a real important aspect of developing a posture of cultural humility. So when I work with people, organizations, and my coaching clients, I we talk about how to remain curious even with people who you may vehemently disagree with, to help them and help yourself understand where they're coming from, right?
Hmm.
So having a posture of cultural humility requires deep curiosity.
Wow.
And that takes time to develop, but it's important because sometimes we don't really know why laggards are being laggards
Mhm. Mhm.
because we don't ask the questions. And once you have the answers to those questions, then maybe you can determine what's the best strategy. Or ideally, it is aspirational. As they hear themselves answer the questions, they could realize for themselves, like, oh, do I really think that?
Wow.
I really think
Wow.
that right now? Like, I just heard myself say that, and I have a problem with what I just said. That is the best case scenario. It
Mhm.
doesn't happen all the time, but it takes time, right? And so this is where the curiosity piece is really important. I don't have this in the book. It's probably the second edition at this point, but I when I do workshops, I talk about Scott Shigeoka's work in his book Seek,
Mhm.
SEEK,
Mhm.
and how to there's four things that organizations can do to create a culture of learning in an organization. One is to say, "Tell me more." So when
Mm.
someone says something that may be confusing, to get in the habit of say, "Well, say more, tell me more," so
Mhm.
that you can actually get at what it is that they're trying to get at. Um, the second is to realize your people are more than their jobs.
Wow. Yes.
That it's not just about the job; they have lives outside the job. Okay. The third one is who else or who's missing from
Mm.
the conversation that we need to include. Okay, and I know I just said four, and I'm blanking on the fourth. But
Well, it may come back to you while we're
no,
talking.
well, anyway, yes, there is a fourth, and I apologize for forgetting, but it'll probably come to me in the middle as we continue to talk.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so tell me more. Who else? People are more than their jobs are
Mhm.
important things, and then that fourth that I will get to. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So having that as part of the way to bring or to talk to that leader that's feeling overlooked, valued, left behind. I
Mhm.
never thought about like really just asking the questions and having them verbalize what actually is the issue,
Yeah.
and that could be a very powerful way to dig deeper, obviously, and maybe get them to even realize, go back to that self-awareness
Mhm.
piece,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So,
I just had the fourth one.
okay.
It's being able to say, "I don't know."
Mm, yeah.
Like, not expecting your people to have all the answers all the time, that it's okay to say, "I don't know," uh,
Yeah.
because sometimes we don't know, and instead of just making stuff up or pretending, which could have
Mhm.
which could have consequences, for your people to be able to say, "Actually, I don't know, I need help."
Wow.
And those are
Yeah.
the 4 aspects of building a culture of curiosity in an organization.
Mhm. Right. I love that.
Mhm.
Um, so what do you think the future of DEI looks like in organizations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we we are at a, inflection point
Mhm.
in that I think we have to make a decision of how we're gonna do our work in the context that we're in. The context is what it is. I would love to go back to the way things were, more openness, more conversations. What's happening is people now feel empowered to question everything and challenge everything.
Mhm.
And so the curiosity is important, right? But I don't know if we're ever going to go back to a point where people would just automatically accept what we're proposing or feel like, no, this is a good thing. I think we have not done a good job of listening
Wow.
to people, and
Mhm.
that has created a backlash where I think the momentum is really strong. And I think what we need to do is be better listeners, demonstrate curiosity, frame things differently for people to understand so that organizations know that they still need to get better.
Mm,
So
yeah.
it's not about accepting everything at face value, but being able to really sit in discomfort, not discomfort, but sit in people not feeling good about or happy about what they're hearing when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
Yeah.
And some organizations are going to do well, and they're going to be continue to be open and have conversations and be willing to change. And there's others that are not. And the question for us is similar to the laggards. If we are in organizations that are just not going to change, we can be curious, we can listen, but ultimately, if there's no movement, we need to make a decision on whether we need to stay in this place or leave
Wow.
and allow them to continue to operate. They do. And we know that probably at some point they're not going to be very successful because they're not retaining their talent.
Mm-hmm.
They're not creating the sense of belonging that their talent needs in order to stay or feel empowered, like they can stay, contribute, not feel like they're in danger of losing their jobs all the time. And they're going to leave the organization, right? So that sense of belonging that organizations want to create will not be created if our organizations choose to ignore that change needs to continue to happen. And if they're okay with that, that's the organization's decision, right? Um, my guess is, though, a lot of organizations are really in that middle piece where they know there's some good stuff around DEI they want to continue, and there's other stuff that they still have questions about. But it's about rallying the troops, getting people in the room, being curious, developing a way forward, and tracking your progress. I think the other thing we haven't done well is tracking our progress and showing the impact that what we're doing is having. And we just have relied to just tell the story like, look, here's a checklist of everything we've done.
Right.
People still feel like, well, that I don't see what that is doing in the organization. So we need to get really good about using data, mining
Yeah.
data to share and tell the story because the story is there, but we don't always do. We, meaning DEI consultants, professionals, don't do a good job of mining the data to help us tell the story of why this is important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really important piece. And I see sometimes people either focus way too much on the data
Mhm,
without the story,
mhm, mhm.
or they actually sometimes focus too much on the story and no data.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you've got to marry both of those.
yeah.
And
It's got to be a balance, and I think we just need to be better at telling the story, using data, remaining curious, being able to deeply listen, and
mhm,
being able to also acknowledge that maybe we're wrong sometimes and
yeah,
that we need to maybe adjust our own approach,
right.
right? It's important for us to be self-aware and know how this work needs to happen and in the cultural context we find ourselves in and what's going to work within that particular culture at this point in time. And that's hard for some people.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Before I begin to wrap up, I'm going to ask you a little bit about another book that you
Okay.
might be working on. But
Mhm.
I also want to hear more about, and you may not have the right answer to this because these are none of the questions I sent you, but this is just an authentic
Okay, that's
conversation.
all right.
Um, for the DEI leader, whether it's white or
Mhm,
brown person
mhm,
or queer or whatever,
mhm,
if they're getting weary in the work,
mm.
does this book help energize? And then what other practical advice or tips would you give that weary DEI leader that wants to do the right thing?
Yeah, I would say it would energize DEI leaders because it would give you a different perspective to think about the work that you're doing that
Mhm.
you might find that energizing. Uh, the word of encouragement would be that I wouldn't have well, I would say that the DEI leader needs to do some soul searching to really make sure that
Mm.
values are in alignment with the organization and the work they're doing.
Wow.
This is where the coaching aspect comes in. And when I have a coaching program where I work with leaders of color who are working in predominantly white spaces to really do values clarification, strengths clarification, role clarification to make sure there's congruence or alignment. If there's not, are they okay with that? My guess is they're not okay with that.
Mhm.
And it becomes a career coaching conversation. Like, okay, if this is truly, if you're not being healthy in this place, then the best thing you can do for yourself and your family may be to figure out an exit strategy. Or if you are okay with that, let's talk about how you develop skills, coping mechanisms so that you can work through the challenges that you're facing in hopes that at some point you'll hit a tipping point.
Wow.
So those are the things that I would say. The encouragement I would say is you can do this. You have to find the support around you to help you navigate the complexity that comes with being a DEI leader in a predominantly white organization or just being
Mhm.
a DEI leader. Again, it
Yeah.
goes back to you can't do this work in isolation. You have to
Yes.
have others around you, a team of people that can help you navigate, whether that's mentors, coaches, colleagues, peers at other organizations. That's going to also help energize you because you'll have people in your corner who are there for you when you need them.
Yeah. That's really powerful, and I'm having, again, so many great nuggets, so many
Mhm,
pieces of wisdom, aha moments,
mhm,
and I think I, as a DEI leader, was getting so in the weeds and
mhm,
busy and, you know, doing life that
mhm,
I had not been connecting with people outside of 5 feet of my office,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And when you said you can't do the work in isolation, I think that's just such a powerful point.
Yeah.
So, even thinking about your book, I'm thinking, well, surely you have like some book clubs underneath your part of your strategy because you can't do the work in isolation. So people should be reading this together. But you did say you have a workbook coming out or something with it.
I mean, that is the next project in my head. The two things that are, well, the one thing that's getting launched from this is a white leader coaching program
Okay.
where I will take a white leader, organizational leader that wants to get better and do the work through the book, as well as provide coaching, 6 months of coaching, 12 sessions, where we dig deep in what it means to lead this work or get better at it, show up in spaces where you may feel like you have to get better at leading a diverse team. And that's the program that'll be launched. Actually, I'll be putting it out there in the next few days. The book piece is the workbook. And I have an idea. I have a cultural humility workbook that I use when I go in and do work with
Hmm.
organizations. The hope is, or the goal is to then convert that into an actual workbook where people can, purchase it and work through the exercises. The book, when you get it, you'll see every chapter ends with a section that I've entitled Take Action. So it has a workbook component to it. What I hope to do with the workbook is actually build on that and add some more exercises for people to work through everything.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So aside from the workbook, do you have another book that you're thinking about processing? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it
Yeah,
or?
the hope is to take my dissertation, like every good academic wants, to take their dissertation and convert it into a book. That was the original intent back in the day, which seems like ages ago. And I did pitch it, and no one bit. And at that point, I didn't know enough about publishing. So the hope is to actually take my dissertation and condense it because it's fairly, it's a
Mhm.
300 page document at this point,
Oh, oh yeah.
and then make it readable, approachable, accessible. And so that's the other project as well. And so the the thing that helped with this book was that I hired a book coach to take me from idea to manuscript, and she did an awesome job. And I've learned a lot through that. And now taking what I learned and looking at these other two potential book projects.
Great.
Mhm.
Well, you are doing amazing work,
Thank you.
and I'm so appreciative of this conversation, honestly, just personally. And I know we're doing it on behalf of the Academy of Creative Coaching, where you do a lot of the same work with our cohorts and
Yep.
our during our weekend intensives and beyond that. So I do want to mention the Academy of Creative Coaching, and please visit our website to find out more about some of our upcoming events and training and things. But if you were even encouraged a little bit today with what you heard, just know that you could have him as your facilitator during your training and
Mhm.
get more of this, and just dig deep and really have some great wisdom, nuggets of wisdom, and do better as a leader, which ultimately is what this is all about. If even if you take the DEI stuff out of it,
Yeah,
um,
and that's important to remember to remind people is that DEI work is really important, and everyone should be involved in that. But the concepts in the book are applicable to outside of just doing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work. It's about being a better leader. And there's a story in the book that I share about that it's not okay to just be a good leader. We should all be striving to be good leaders or competent leaders. Um, where what I really stress is this idea of moving from good to exceptional,
mm,
and and that's really where the sweet spot is if we're going to be really good at what we do in a leadership role.
I love that. I love that. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Please, please visit his LinkedIn page, and I think you have a few more interviews coming up. I know mine was the best, but
Yes, yes, they'll be dropping. I'll be doing recording some more that, of course, will drop later at later
yes,
dates. But
yes.
the most
So
recent is the one you heard last week that dropped, which is
yeah.
actually an interview with my book coach.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Wait. Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I found that one on YouTube. This will
Mhm.
we'll also put this on YouTube as well as on our LinkedIn and Facebook pages. So if you I see someone just joining, feel free to watch the replay. Great, great conversation. You if please you have to get this book.
Mhm.
This is an amazing conversation and just great information. So, and we all need it. And I love your audience. I love
Yeah.
who you're speaking to.
Thank you.
So,
Mhm.
thank you so much. And good luck with all your launches and conversations. And we'll be watching closely for the workbook and more to come.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And please visit academyofcreativecoaching.com for our upcoming training. We have one coming up in Atlanta this weekend and a few more in June and easing into the summer and the fall. So visit us and we can't wait to see you again. Thank you.